Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this fast forward planet. And speaking of fast forward, we're connecting here through fast forward technology that didn't exist really in this functional way. I remember Skype video conversations, I don't know, a decade ago, but technology is changing far faster than we can understand, apply, and get our not just our heads around it, but our sense of being able to manage these tools, especially with the emergence of artificial intelligence, or as Chris Mims calls it simulated intelligence, which is changing everything. The war in Ukraine, which actually helped through the drone revolution, Ukraine withstand a brutal invasion. It's poised to do all kinds of things in the arts and in technology industries, for better or worse. The Vatican this morning released Pope Leo the 14th's first encyclical. These are these letters that are sort of popes ruminate on things. I got to participate in a meeting that preceded Pope Francis's encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si. I was at the Vatican for a week back in 2014. And it was a memorable conclave of all kinds of people from the sciences and the theological community. And they've done this again. This one that's rolling out now is about AI and humanity. How do we maintain our humanity as we become more as the techno-human condition, as one of my guests, Brad Allenby, wrote with Dan Sarowitz more than a decade ago, 15 years ago, in that book, Techno-Human Condition. How do we maintain the thing we think of as being human in a world that's is so transformational, where the lines between us and our technology are going away? And Andrew Maynard, at the top of your screen, also at Arizona State, both of them, has been blogging and writing, has a new book out, and has been thinking for a very long time about the same kinds of questions. How to be human in a world that's undergoing these changes. So I thought we'd first just kind of quickly take your temperatures as in the context of this rollout today, which I have up on the blog, and which you both have, it's a 40,000 word document, so I don't expect you to summarize it, but just maybe each of you just sort of state where you're coming from and where this sits in the context of how you think about technology and humanity. We start with Brad, perhaps. Brad, I've known you for a long time. I think I knew you when you were still at AT&T, or maybe you had
Oh, yeah.
gone to the University of Virginia.
No,
And
that was during my AT&T years.
yeah, and you were teaching a course on how to fix Florida, which I thought was wonderful.
Yeah, well, we obviously failed, but what the heck?
Well, yeah, and here we are. Uh, I think that turned out to be sugar was the problem, but this is
Well, it's agriculture in its current pattern. Yes.
yes. Just you wrote that book in 2011. We have this rollout now of the Vatican, the sort of the ethical world trying to kind of stake a claim. And how would you position this in the flow of what's happening right now?
Well, I I think the Pope addressed three sort of major issues. The first was the jobs issue, uh, which I think is absolutely appropriate. Uh, However, I think the general dialogue around jobs is both very preliminary and right now not very deeply thought out. Uh, we simply don't have enough data to begin to figure it out, but a lot of the thinking now is pretty primitive. But it is important. It's an important issue, and it's going to be politically, socially, culturally, and economically important for a lot of people. The second thing that the Pope focused on was the need for worldwide equity in terms of how these powerful technologies are deployed and used. Uh, that has been a point for a lot of people, but frankly, the entire incentive structure around AI militates against that. Uh, it's a great idea, but I don't see any reasonable pathway to getting it accomplished in the short term. In the longer term, I think it certainly will. It's the nature of technologies that they do become adopted broadly. But I don't see how you do that in the short term here. And then finally, the question of the sort of opaque inner workings of AI. And I think that's inherent in the technology. You will only stop that when you stop the technology. And I think here's the fundamental question I would raise about the Pope's perspective, and that is, I simply don't see how you can do what he and the church want to do in the short term. The incentive structures behind AI, the fact that it's existential for China, it's existential for the United States, it's existential for Russia. If they lose Ukraine, it's going to be because of AI and drones and other systems on the battlefield. So I just don't see how this can be implemented in the real world.
Yeah, I share your skepticism on that, especially for that point you make, and also, we focus so much on the corporate end of this, and obviously the United States has been leading on that. But what happens in Russia and what happens in China, or isn't constrained by even our corporate norms. So Andrew Maynard, what's the future of being human today? Is it different today? Is it different today than it was yesterday?
Well, maybe it is. And I love the sort of Brad makes me the optimist in the room here. Thank you, Brad.
My pleasure.
Let me start off by saying, reading this document, and I got up early and read through the whole thing. I felt seen. And in many ways, I think this is a profoundly important document in that it positions what it means to be human within the context of transformative technologies, and reflects on a lot of the conversations that many of us, including you, Brad, have had over the decades about how we think about transitioning through technological change in a society that values human flourishing. And so much of the document reflects, consolidates those ideas that certainly to me have driven my career. So that felt really important reading it. It also does something which I also think is important, and wrote about this before it actually came out, in that when we think about humanity in the context of deeply transformative technologies like AI, I've long said that you've got to think about how that technology impacts what we do. This is the work, the value creation, where we live, which is the environment, and who we actually are as people. Previous encyclicals have dealt with what we do and where we live, but this is the first one that has gone so deep in challenging us to think about who we are. And so that to me is exciting. But there are a couple of provisos here, and this is where I do align a little bit more with you, Brad. The first one is this encyclical, to me, lays a really strong social and philosophical framework for doing this, irrespective of whether you're Catholic, religious, or not. And to this extent, I actually think it aligns with countries like China in terms of how they're trying to think about things and actually look at human flourishing. So that foundation is important. Is it implementable? I'm a little bit doubtful, like you are, Brad, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. I think it's important to have these foundations that we can actually build on. And from that perspective, I actually think it's really important. The other thing, though, that worries me is this is absolutely a human-centric document. It basically says that humanity and humans' relationship with God, because this is a religious document, is absolutely sacrosanct. And AI should not be challenging that. Philosophies and thinking that go beyond what it is to be human at the moment should not be entertained. And I'm not sure that we can actually entertain that perspective. You look at how AI is challenging our notion of what it means to be human. My sense is that we need to think more broadly than that. And in that respect, there is language in the encyclical that talks about AI as a tool and talks about using it wisely as a tool. in my work, I am deeply challenging that notion that AI is just a tool, to the extent that I actually think it's a dangerous framing. Now, there is nuance in the encyclical that I think allows us to go beyond there, but I think that this is the beginning of a conversation, nowhere near the end of a conversation.
Oh, for sure. And now let me play. I'm going to play a couple of clips from it, from the commentary that was during the rollout this morning, because I think they really are. They get at some of these points. First, Anna Rowlands, who is a scholar at University of, I just was looking at her. Hold on one second. Rowlands. I just had her in front on my screen. She is at Durham University in Britain.
Yes, yep.
Yep, and here we go.
Tools that, like the languages they harvest, carry cultures.
Hold on.
Today's sophisticated technologies are not mere tools, but tools that, like the languages they harvest, carry cultures and bear moral architectures. Magnificat Humanitas notes that the powers of innovation that have traditionally resided with states are today concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy individuals whose cultures are concealed from common good scrutiny and risk appearing as a new imperium. Pope Leo prompts us to ask, in the interest of the common good, how can we resist such distorted concentrations of power in the hands of the few? How can we re-engage technologies as a matter of the common good?
Yeah, so she kind of replicates the point you made about the difference between a tool and what this is.
Yeah, though I don't think she actually goes far enough. And I've also got to say, I love the way that she uses her position right next to Christopher Olah. One of these people she's talking about, basically right from under his feet with those comments.
I have his clips coming up in a second.
Yeah,
yeah, I know he was staring at her the whole time, kind of.
I know. It's actually quite delightful. But yes, she makes a really important point that you cannot just think of AI as a tool, because it does have these embedded sort of values that it actually reflects back to us, AI as the mirror. So it's not a mere tool. But actually, I would go further than that and say that because AI's use of how it uses language, which is a medium that actually affects how we think and how we perceive the world and how we build relationships, it actually has that ability to impact us in a way that no previous tool has been able to do. It actually begins to morph and change our understanding of our humanity. And I don't think her comments go as far as that.
Yeah, and I would add a historical point too. If you look for, one of the ways to think about radical big technologies is to try to find historical analogies. They inevitably are only analogies, and that's an important thing to remember, but it's a way to think about them. It's another lens. If you look at changes that have foundationally changed human cognition, then you end up with only a few examples. One would be the shift from an oral poetry-based society, say the Homeric society, to a written language and a written structure. That allows people to export much of their cognitive load to external technologies, and that begins a process that foundationally changes human cognition. The one that comes to mind that's more recent is the printing press in Europe. And that's a cautionary tale. You couldn't have had the Reformation without the printing press. I mean, you can't tell people that they should know God for themselves if they have no way to access any information about God. What you did when you did that, though, was you set up 150 years of the worst religious warfare that Europe has known. So you need to appreciate the power of what these technologies can do. And I fear that that is not present in what she says.
Yeah.
I think also she misses And I believe the Pope misses, and indeed, a lot of the regulatory thrust around AI misses. And that is, there's an assumption here that the people you're talking to would be willing to follow the regulations. Now, perhaps in the case of the US and China, that's true. But the Russian model is very different. I mean, the American model is basically have private firms do the work and we'll work with them. It's a private enterprise kind of model. The Chinese, it's the PLA and the party trying to manage a pretty broad and fairly interesting commercial ecosystem working on AI. But the Russians are the fascinating ones, right? Russia has a GDP, if you just look at Russia, at least, again, these figures are somewhat dubious and they're not purchase power parity adjusted. But the Russian GDP is less than Texas or New York or California. However, the Russian model is to integrate transcriminal enterprises into the Russian state as active elements of state power. The transnational criminal network has a GDP, and again, it's hard to get exact numbers on this, but has a GDP that lies between the United States and China. It is the second largest GDP in the world. Wow. That means that from the beginning, any effort to regulate AI is going to miss at least the second biggest GDP in the world. And it's a very creative and active sector. And I think that keeps getting dropped. The other thing that we tend to, there you go. Yeah. The other thing that we tend to ignore, I think, is, again, how existential states view this. China is doing an interesting job and a fairly cautious job of trying to regulate AI, in part because they don't want to let it slip out from under the control of the party. But if China feels that the US is threatening to achieve AI dominance, I think they're going to go all out. They have to, in the interests of the state. And we tend to overlook these really difficult but very potent factors driving the evolution of AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been wondering about that too. And again, that gets back to the focus we've tended to have on the companies. Now, I want to go through some of the statements that Chris Olah made when he wasn't staring at his colleague there on the podium. And it was quite a remarkable speech, and it's all I have the full thing on the blog at revkin.substack.com. But here, let's just start with number one. He went through 3 points.
Myself. They are mistaken.
Hold on a second.
Believe that matters of AI are best. Some might believe that matters of AI are best handled by computer scientists like myself. They are mistaken. The questions raised by AI are bigger than the AI research community, not just in their implications, but also in their nature. AI systems are not engineered the way a bridge or an airplane is engineered. We understand an airplane because we designed every part of it, and we understand the physics that act on it. AI models are not like that. They are grown on a structure roughly modeled after the brain, on an enormous inheritance of human thought and speech. And what is grown is far more subtle, odd, and beautiful than science fiction prepared us for. They are not the cold, calculating robots we were promised. They are made from us, from our words.
So, thoughts on that? From the heart of the... Now, obviously, Anthropic, has got exiled by the Trump administration, but maybe Brad first and then Andrew.
Well, I think if you want to be really cynical, you can say that this is an important part of Anthropic's marketing effort. They're clearly positioning themselves as quote unquote the responsible AI company. The mistake, to your point, Andy, that a lot of people make, I think, is to equate AI with just private firms, and usually just American private firms. I think that can lead one to oversimplistic analysis of the complexities, the challenges that AI actually poses.
And Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, so just looking at this, I'm still processing this, but I find it really interesting that what Chris is laying out feels almost at odds with the encyclical. So the encyclical is sort of saying here is a powerful technology that we've got to fit within a structure of social discipline that puts human dignity first, and we've got to work out how to develop this tool so that we respect human dignity. Chris is saying, this is something that we haven't got the foggiest what it is. This is a thing that we've grown and we're still finding out what it does.
Actually, all right, continue your thought, and then I'm going to play another clip.
Right. So that tells me we've got this, as he said, this weird, wonderful, scary, amazing thing that is challenging every aspect of our society. We can't just sort of hunker down and sort of say we've got to sort of look at the old way of thinking about things. This challenges everything. And so while I actually think that the encyclical sets out a really important basis for how we think about us as humans and what is important as humans, this is a technology that actually challenges a lot of those foundations.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well said, Ed.
Yeah.
Here's clip number 2.
If that happens, supporting those displaced will be a moral.
Hold on a second. This is more about the labor issue.
There is a real possibility that AI will displace human labor at a very large scale. If that happens, supporting those displaced will be a moral imperative of historic proportions. This task will be difficult enough, but I worry most dialogue misses an even harder challenge. AI development is concentrated in a handful of wealthy nations. How will we ensure that the gains of AI are shared globally? We do not have a mechanism for this. It is an unsolved problem. And it is the kind of problem the church has historically refused to let the world ignore.
Yeah, and that's still within the frame of nations, as you both have been saying. That's leaving out something big. So let me just play the next clip, because this is what gets to this issue of what the hell is this anyway? Hold on a second.
It's from human neuroscience. We find evidence of introspection.
Hold on. Whoops, got to get back to the training. Here we go.
The third is the need for discernment on the nature of AI models. I am a scientist. I lead a research team that studies the internal structure of these models. What is actually happening inside them? And I will be honest, we keep finding things that are mysterious, even unsettling. We find structures that mirror results from human neuroscience. We find evidence of introspection. We find internal states that functionally mirror joy, satisfaction, fear, grief, and unease. I don't know what that means, but I think it warrants ongoing discernment.
Discernment.
I'd like to close with a request. We need more of the world, religious communities, civil society, scholars, governments, and indeed all people of goodwill, to do what His Holiness has done here. To take seriously, to look closely, and to push events in a better direction. We need informed critics who will tell the labs when we are failing. We need moral voices that the incentives cannot bend. Today is just the beginning.
Yeah, today is just the beginning. But boy, he said some things there that were pretty interesting.
Yep.
I mean, none of this is very new, but we don't understand what's in this black box.
So I'm actually waiting for the next encyclical that actually talks about AI rights rather than human rights, because this is the tension that we're seeing. We're still, and this goes back to your language, Brad. We're still trying to keep hold of the current world order and say, how do we sort of maintain that in the light of this new technology? At some point, we're going to have to flip. If everything Chris is saying is true, and say, how do we co-inhabit a world where we have grown something alien?
Well, and I think, Andrew, to your point, which is absolutely correct, I think one of the major issues behind why this is an incremental step at best is that we're not just talking about AI. if you look
Mhm.
across the world, we are building out information infrastructures with all of the functionality of cognition in a completely uncontrolled way, driven only by commercial and national security interests. We're building out communications. We're building out 6G. We're putting sensors in everything. We have massive AI networks like, say, Tesla or Waymo that take environmental and personal information, feed it into central AIs, and feed it out again. We have Moltbook, which is a social media grouping where AI agents talk to each other and people are allegedly not permitted. Now, Moltbook is probably a little bit of tech bro playing around, and it's more like a science fiction. But Moltbook was purchased by Meta, and Meta has started a basically an arms race with other big AI companies to create a real active agentic AI social media that is not susceptible to tech bro interference. I mean, what we are doing, if you'll pardon a little bit of flamboyance, is we're building the mind of God from the inside out. And if you take that to the Catholic Church, I have to believe there's going to be a very different reaction. This isn't science fiction. Look around you and look at all of the very potent, cognitively active structures that are being built around the world.
So can I? So
yeah,
you,
yeah.
No. I'm just fixated on that phrasing. We are building the, what was it? We're building the
We
mind
are
of
building
God
the mind of God from the inside out.
So, and I just wanted to sort of come back on that, because this reflects to me that the deeply jagged edge of AI. At one end, we're doing these things which are incomprehensible. And yet at the other end, I have colleagues who have never even opened ChatGPT. They're sort of vaguely aware of it. And so within that context, you can understand where the Vatican is coming. They're trying to sort of pull people along into this new world, but they can't afford to go right to that jagged edge, which is where we see things happening.
No, I agree. I mean, there's one of the things that happens with any significant change in technology is that the usual distance between the laggards and the jagged edge people, which is usually relatively small in a stable social and historical period, gets very extended. And the people that are on the jagged edge are really, truly scary. And most of the people are back here. It's a very unstable situation. I mean, the idea that we're going to bring the benefits of AI to the globe, it'll happen eventually, but the idea that it isn't going to be driven at the jagged edge by, say, the Chinese and American militaries, the big tech companies, all of whom know that this is existential for them, I mean, that's just where it's going to happen.
Boy. So what does the average person do in a situation like this? And
So
Andrew, you wrote your newest book is on that, which is sort of functional and practical. Like, here's some things you can do before the world explodes.
Well, at the very least, be aware of the breadth of the landscape. I actually think that what the Catholic Church here is doing here, what the Vatican is doing here, is important to most people. Yes, it is. I would agree with Brad. Naive in many ways. It is still responding to a current world order, and yet most people. And so I would actually argue that to sort of people who are really grappling with this, that aren't at the jagged edge, actually paying attention to what this encyclical says, to actually take the time and the care to read it. Don't just dump it into your AI. But I mean, it's 40,000 words, but you can sit down for an hour or so and read this. And it's worth reading because the nuance in there is nuance that an AI will not pull out. It gives you a framing which at least puts you on the first step to start to think about a different sort of future.
Well, and it gets at the consequential scope of what's unfolding. I think the thing that may be missed is, though, the temporal reality, the time scale of what's unfolding. And I did a show on this before, and that's why a few years ago I signed that letter. There was that thing of 100 from the AI safety entity, and there's predictions of all sorts that within X number of months or within at least 2 years or 3 years, these things are going to be so far beyond comprehension, let alone management, that it's game over with that transnational mega country that Brad was talking about in control, perhaps. I don't know. And I have a son, by the way, who works in special effects in the movie business, and he's thinking about it a lot from his standpoint. And he says you're all worrying too much. He says that he's more like it's a tool.
Well, so there's two things at least that need to be considered. One is a lot of social systems and cultural systems and institutions are very, very inertial. So we have time to deal with this. Take academia. I mean, Andrew is absolutely right. Most of our colleagues are clueless. I was talking to somebody from North Carolina State at a conference I was at a couple of days ago, and they were saying even in engineering, there are still many professors that are refusing to let their students use any AI whatsoever, which is, to my mind, is malpractice. But that's the inertia that you're going to run into. So this change is not going to occur for many people very quickly. That said, at the cutting edge, the speed of evolution is staggering, and you see it in mythos, right? You see it in the release of AI systems that essentially make the entire structure that we have built our economies on. All of our money is electronic, and it's electrons, and it's all protected by, it turns out, systems that could easily be hacked by the AI we've got now. And if you realize that the real cutting edge of AI is not what we see, in fact, I will bet most companies have slowed down their introduction of some of these systems because they don't want to scare people. The real cutting edge of AI is in the national laboratories, the militaries, the big companies, and that is truly, truly something that we're not prepared for. I mean, I would be very surprised if we haven't already hit AGI in the laboratories of some of these companies.
Andrew?
Yeah, I'm not so sure, but I'm going to put a proviso on that. So one of my big frustrations at the moment is working very, very deeply with cutting edge public AI is how incredibly transformative it is on one hand, and how incredibly frustrating it is on another hand. There are some things where it far excels what I can do, and then I suddenly find that it's a really dumb system. And so that makes me, that gives me pause for thought about sort of whether this is sort of going to be the beginning of the next era of our AI overlords. Apart from a couple of things. One is what Brad says, and I'm pretty sure that what we're seeing is just a small snippet of what is actually happening in these companies. And you can see this from what Chris Olar said, that they are studying these and they do not understand the nature of what's happening inside the black box. And that tells me that they're working with systems way more advanced than we're actually seeing. But the other aspect of it is, I actually think we make a mistake when we try and equate AI to human intelligence. This is absolutely an alien form of intelligence. And as soon as we try and equate it to humans, we make categorical errors because it means we can either be wowed because we say it's better than human intelligence, or we can be dismayed or sort of dismissive because we say it's not as clever as me. That's not the point. The point is we've got something completely alien that is increasingly in charge of the things that our lives depend on.
Let me reinforce that. Andrew has made probably, I think, the most important point that people need to grasp. we are not talking about artificial intelligence. That language itself takes us back to thinking that somehow human intelligence is the sine qua non of cognition, which we know it's not. We are dealing with a truly alien intelligence that we're building and distributing with very little idea of what it's going to do. I mean, this is an extraordinary roll of the dice by all of humanity. And I think you got to be careful not to trivialize it.
Yep.
Andrew's absolutely dead on.
But just in addition to that, this is a shapeshifter technology. So it's an alien intelligence that's able to put on a human body and seem like the most empathetic, understanding, authoritative human you've ever met. Which is why people will say, of course, it's just a tool. Of course, I can trust it. Of course, it's not affecting my cognition, because it knows, it sort of knows, inverted commas, how to make you feel that.
And boy, wait till one of the things to remember is that a lot of technologies, particularly in information technologies, win because they happen to be the best technology for the porn industry. I mean,
right.
VHS.
Eventually.
That's how it all starts, right?
No, VHS versus Betamax. Betamax was a better system, but VHS had more porn movies. And look who won.
Yeah.
And I think, and the reason I raise this is because, to Andrew's point, we already have thousands and thousands of male adolescents that have been seduced by ChatGPT and psychologically unhealthy ways.
Yep.
And when you begin to combine that with the robotics, the haptics, the systems we're developing, I think you are raising the real possibility, and this goes back to what the Vatican is saying. You're raising the real possibility that the very basis of human relationships, the family, the pairing, the mating, that is gone. And we haven't begun to think about the implications of that.
Yeah. And of course, that goes right to the heart of some of the things this encyclical says about the supreme importance of relationships in defining our humanity.
Right.
I do want to say something. So you put this up, you just had up on the screen, Andy, which I think is lovely, because it also brings up.
Like it.
Here it comes. Well, I asked Gemini to make it.
Oh, right. This is where things get
And
weirdly.
it took a couple of iterations. The first one had like dust coming from the front of the bus, like the bus was going backwards. So, anyway, sorry, what were you going to say, Andrew? Sorry.
Yeah, no, but it reminded me of something which I think often gets missed. So we're often looking at the developers of AI saying all the responsibility lies on them and they're not doing this right. But I would actually add another category there. It's the first mover implementers. And so it's the companies that are rushing to incorporate AI into everything. It's the governments that are trying to AIize everything. It is the universities that have decided that they have got to go fast and throw caution to the wind to put AI in everything. They are all people in this bus that are pushing AI progress. So it's not just the tech bros. Right. It is every company that is saying we do not have time to ask about care and responsibility and ethics, because we've just got to go fast. And that is propagating the challenges, I think, that we're seeing beginning to emerge.
And let me add to that point, which is excellent. The way that the public handles complex topics today is by developing morality plays that simplify their ability to identify a villain and frame it then in terms of that villain. So climate change, it's the fossil fuel companies. AI, it's the tech bros, which is both understandable because this stuff is incredibly complex and the public doesn't really have time to do the kinds of thinking about it that, say, Andrew does. But it's also trivializing in a way that means you never get to many of these deeply serious issues.
Right.
And in that sense, I think what the Vatican has done and said is very important. I agree with Andrew on that.
Well,
But it's only a start.
yeah. Well, right. And I'm going to swing back to the Vatican because
that with our differences,
I want to hear a little bit from
we
the
can
Pope.
listen to one another. This interchange clearly bespeaks.
He starts here. He's talking about the interchange between him and Chris Ola, essentially, between the technologists and the theologians. So hold on.
What a great sign of hope it is that with our differences, we can listen to one another. This interchange clearly bespeaks the gravity of the moment, as well as confidence that together we can discern the major questions of our time, and so the future of humanity. At key moments in history, the Church is called to decipher the new things in the light of the gospel and the dignity of the human being. 135 years ago, my venerable predecessor, Leo XIII, observed the situation of factory workers, their families uprooted, and new forms of poverty generated by rapid industrial transformation. He understood that the Church could not remain distant. Within an epochal turning point menacing human dignity, the encyclical Rerum Novarum spoke its evangelical and social word about new things underway. Today, we find ourselves facing a transformation of similar magnitude, with perhaps even greater consequences. Artificial intelligence already touches many areas of our lives and affects decisions that shape human coexistence. It is also dramatically changing how war is waged. Like the earlier Leo, I feel entrusted to look upon another huge transformation with eyes of faith, with lucidity of reason, with openness to mystery, and with cries of the poor and the earth resounding in my heart. Magnifica Humanitas was born from listening, like Leo XIII did. I've listened to scientists and engineers who work with sincere enthusiasm on technologies capable of alleviating immense suffering, to political leaders and public officials who have perseveringly sought just rules, to parents and teachers who are deeply concerned for the future of younger generations. Other very troubling voices have also reached me about increasingly autonomous weapons systems, practically beyond any human reach to govern them effectively. I hear very troubling accounts of algorithms that can block access to healthcare, employment, and security on the basis of data tainted by prejudice and injustice. And I've heard the silence of those who have no voice when decisions are made. Decisions likely to generate new forms of exclusion and suffering. From this listening matured a disturbing conviction expressed in Magnifica Humanitas. Artificial intelligence needs to be disarmed. The word is strong, I know, but deliberately chosen because this moment needs words capable of attracting attention, awakening consciences, and indicating paths forward for humanity. The Church has long been working for nuclear disarmament, aware that every great technical power can affect people's lives, and so must be accompanied by adequate moral discernment and public control. Nuclear disarmament remains a service to peace and the dignity of the human family. In a similar sense, artificial intelligence now demands to be disarmed, freed from logics that turn it into an instrument of domination, exclusion, and death. Like nuclear energy, it must be at the service of all and of the common good. Decisions about technology must never be separated from conscience and responsibility. Let us not sleep as others do, admonished the Apostle Paul, but let us keep awake. Such vigilance is necessary today. Peace, not merely the absence of war, is justice at work. But when technology weakens our critical sense, peace itself is at risk. Disarming, however, is not enough. We must build. The word build reminds me of my years as a missionary in Peru. In 2017, torrential rains and floods struck the
I got to pause there because there's a lot that he discussed. What do you think about the idea of disarmament? We talked about this a little bit before we went on live. Andrew, maybe you first.
Well, actually, I was going to bounce this to Brad, saying that this is your area, Brad.
Yeah, I don't see it. I mean, I think that one of the dangers.
You mean you don't see it as possible, or you don't?
I don't see it as possible. I mean, my students, every class that I've had since November 22, when ChatGPT dropped, every class I've had, the majority of students want to slow this thing down and think about it. And every class we go through the reasons why that will never happen. Now, scenarios, so you can't really say never, but it's highly unlikely. I mean, you're going to ask Ukraine to give up the development of increasingly autonomous weapons when to do so means that the Russians are going to walk over their wives and their children. That's not going to happen. That's existential for Ukraine. You're going to ask the United States to deliberately lose the AI race with China. It's not going to happen. I mean, what I think we don't understand, and it gets trivialized by focusing only on the tech bros, is the very, very powerful forces that push this technology forward, not just in the obvious ways we've talked about. I mean, the ways that we use it in say, business to streamline various processes, but in all of the potential ways that it can be deployed across a very complex human society. All of that is happening regardless of any kind of consideration. It's not helped by the fact that the language we use is so imprecise that we, in effect, lose the train of thought of our argument. So when we talk about, say, autonomous weapons, there is no agreement on what autonomous means in the context of a real military operation. When we talk about free will, when we talk about consciousness, when we talk about all of these concepts, we think we know what we're talking about, and generally that's good enough. We can be fuzzy. But when we are trying to understand with absolute clarity what we're talking about, those words fail. The earlier point that Andrew made is illustrative of that. We're dealing with an alien intelligence. That is profoundly disturbing because almost nobody understands that.
So can I ask you a question, Brad? And I do have a perspective on this, but I want to try and sort of modulate it a little bit. So effectively, we're talking about either the weaponization of AI or the utilization of AI in ways that it's effectively used as a weapon.
Right.
So in your work, where do you draw the line there? Are you just looking at nation against nation, or would you even consider the individual putting out deep fakes or using AI to shame somebody else or to elevate themselves? Well, is that a form of weaponization, and is it a continuum?
It's a continuum. And the rules that we drew 5 or 10 years ago are inadequate today. I mean, so we talk about the value of democratizing technology, for example. It is a nightmare to think of democratizing the ability of AI to help you develop biological agents to every individual around the world. I mean, and yet that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to deal with it at all. So, go ahead.
Sorry. No. And that's where my thinking was going. So no, I absolutely understand the framing of basically sort of avoiding the military use or the weaponization of AI. But as you say, Brad, it is almost impossible to understand how you would do that. It's like sort of saying we're going to sort of remove the weaponization of oxygen. I mean, it's it sounds nice, but it's a nonsensical statement.
Right.
The only thing I would add to that is, I'm with you there, but there's a little niddling bit in my brain that is telling me, what if I'm saying this because this is what I'm used to, and I cannot extend my imagination outside of that to a world where maybe we could do this? So I would like to at least leave the door open. But like you, I find it very, very hard to imagine how you actually pull back from a technology like this that is so ubiquitous and so alien and so accessible.
I think you're absolutely right. And virtually everything we're talking about is a scenario, because we really don't know what's actually out there. So it could be possible. I think it's highly improbable, though, because you remember that letter that thousands of AI experts signed saying AI shouldn't be used for military purposes. Yeah. Well, first, that was incredibly naive. That was never going to happen. That's like telling the Prussian army, well, fine, but you got to leave your guns at home. No, it's just not going to happen. But the second thing is that the definition of conflict, even at the state level, has been so expanded that virtually all civil infrastructure, for example, is a legitimate military target today by the doctrines of both Russia and China. So where does that, what do we have to worry about and what do we not have to worry about? It's a huge question, but it's one that our vocabulary and our framing don't allow us to ask.
And sorry, Andy, I didn't mean to sort of carry on this conversation, but this is
no. I'm intrigued.
Because Brad, part of your work looks at weaponized narrative, basically the use of language as a weapon. And we've created this technology that is exquisitely good at using language. So then how does that fit in with this whole sort of framework or doctrine around weaponization?
Well, I mean, so what it tells you, and I don't want to get too flamboyant here, God forbid, what it tells you is the Enlightenment is over. I mean, the core of the Enlightenment is the focus on the individual and the individual's ability to make political and social decisions with reasoning, with morality, with ethics. In other words, not far from what the Vatican is saying. But what do we know? We know right now that we have the ability to build psychological models using AI that are good enough to enable me to intervene in your psychology using products that AI gives me in ways that will change your behavior without you knowing it. In other words, the entire idea of the informed citizen is obsolete. Now, what that tells you, if you follow that line, is that the Enlightenment is over. I mean,
and can I underline that, because I suspect many people hearing that will think this is you being sort of very, very flamboyant indeed. But this is reality. You look at cases of AI psychosis. You look at people who are so sucked into their AI use, normal sort of rational people who you can see their behavior changing. This is the world we're living in now.
That's right. And if you look at what's going on in related fields, things like Neuralink, where we're developing brain chip technology, and then you begin to integrate that with AI, what you begin to see is a world where individuals become, all right, I hate to use a metaphor, but individuals become chips that get hung off metacognitive systems operating, framed by AI in the cloud. I mean, the idea that human cognition is going to be adequate 5 or 10 years from now is probably a fantasy. And that raises huge questions. What should we be teaching our students? What should Andrew and I be teaching our students to enable them to function in a world like that. And this goes back to something I think that Andrew said earlier, and that is there are places for human cognition where AI fails because it's an alien cognition. It's got different patterns. But what are they? What is it that humans can do and will be able to do that AI can't? Where are the comparative advantages? We need to be thinking in a much more sophisticated way about how these cognitive structures are going to function. Because if we can't, how are we going to teach people to participate in this kind of economy?
Wow. I want to take this to one more level, and then before we get closed out on a more practical
Practical, you want Andrew?
Layer. Yeah. But no, here I'm going to take it into Brad's space a little further. We had the discussion about this once, and I wonder about this. I'm just going to show you a note. Let me see if I can get this on. Okay. Yeah. So I think about, planetary sustainability. I had a nice conversation with Adam Frank here. I've talked to him for a long time. And I think about intelligence and the emergence of intelligence and technology. And I think about when I went to that Vatican meeting in 2014 on sustainable humanity, Cardinal Maradiaga said, nowadays mankind seems to be a technical giant and an ethical child. And in putting together what I think about when I talk to planetary futures people like Adam Frank, and when I hear theologians and others continue to say the technology is outpacing us, and then I wonder, is this why it's so quiet out there? Because this sort of drama we're playing out right now is almost predictable. It's you could just see, can a society evolve technological capacities like this and avoid having the downside emerge in a way that's big and bad? As I say here, the capacity to innovate outpaces the capacity for ethical judgment, complexity, comprehension. The galaxy is quiet because intelligence is implicitly, ultimately maladaptive. Is that what we're talking about here? Maladaptive for us, meaning the human part. And then Brad says, of course, you said this once to me, Brad. We're presuming intelligent life is intelligible to us, and we were just saying, Chris Ola was saying this isn't intelligible to him. So right. Are we unlucky enough or lucky enough to be living at a moment when we're answering Fermi's paradox?
Well,
we'll start with Brad, and then we'll go to the hopeful note of Andrew.
Yeah. No,
and then I'm going to get back to the Pope before we close out.
I think that is entirely possible. I mean, there's two really basic ways to look at this. The first is human-centric, right? We look at AI and we think, okay, how can we continue to prosper in an AI world? And that may be the wrong way to look at this. I mean, we're busy building out a mind, a cognition that will be completely inaccessible to us, that will operate at levels that we won't be able to come near, that we won't be able to comprehend. We know that right now, human cognitive structures are low bandwidth in a high bandwidth world, and it's going to get much, much worse. So the possibility is that, yes, humans may well pass from the scene or become, simply the worker bees that keep a structure going. I mean, pick your science fiction scenario.
The Matrix.
Yeah. Well, the Matrix was wrong because we're lousy batteries.
Yeah,
we are as chips.
Exactly.
If you'd had the Matrix wired to our brains, then you would have had a Matrix that Neo wouldn't have had a chance with. But that's the Matrix's problem. But I think that the complexity part is where we can see us falling down all over. I mean, look at how people are retreating into simplistic narratives, right? Whether it's right or left, whether it's climate change or whether it's AI itself, we retreat to simplistic narratives. That's not done out of meanness or spite or hate. That's done out of self-protection. I mean, people are running into a world that they cannot possibly comprehend. And in order to make any sense of it at all, to protect themselves, they fall back on their simple narratives. We fail enormously, institutionally and psychologically, at being able to comprehend complexity. AI enables a comprehension of complexity that we can't do. And I don't know about Andrew, but one thing that consistently amazes me about AI is how it can take a very complex product or a very complex question and create an organized answer. It is absolutely brilliant at that. Complexity comprehension. Just at the time when we are failing, we develop the ability to comprehend complexity through AI. I mean, it's pretty cool.
So there's a positive note.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's a good
Well-
that's a good segue to Andrew.
Yeah. So I think there's a very real chance that as a civilization we will burn out, that we will discover that human exceptionalism means nothing to the universe and to the march of entropy. But I don't care. I think what is important, and again, this is just my philosophy, is what it means to be human here and now, what it means to be human in terms of the value we create for ourselves, how we identify worth, how we create value with relationships with other. That's not being exceptional. It's just, to me, being human. And if you focus on that and the near term, it really doesn't matter too much what the future of humanity is. Maybe our candle will burn bright and burn out, but the here and now then becomes important. And that, in a sense, is what is reflected in the encyclical. Not all of it, because the encyclical is wrapped up in a religious sort of bubble that says actually sort of humans' relationship with God and by extension with the universe has primacy here. I would disagree with that, but I would agree 100% with the fact that you find meaning and value in those relationships in the here and now. And so that actually gives me hope, and it gives me excitement when I see what happens with AI, because wherever it goes, if we keep hold of what it means to be human within that, we can continue to create value on our own terms.
That's beautifully articulated. I just want, and you're also echoing the conundrum we all face as individuals. We know where we're going to burn out, and actually, the three of us are in the latter part. I mean, not too far, hopefully, but we are going to burn out. So then, how do you function day to day? Is an existential question we all face, and this is just a bigger version of that. So there's kind of positivity in that.
Well, and there's more positivity too. And this is an absolutely fascinating world. As sentient organisms, to be able to watch what's going on, that's just staggering privilege right there.
Yeah.
I mean, to live in the first chapter of a science fiction novel and know that you're living in a science fiction novel and it's real, man, it doesn't get any better than that.
I would agree.
We are unbelievably lucky, all of us, at this stage of Earth history. As Stuart Hart at Cornell, I saw some lecture he gave on sustainability and business, and he was talking about chronocentrism. I might have brought this up with Andrew before. He said every generation thinks of itself as being super important, but I do think like this moment does feel like super important.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes that's right.
Yeah. So let's just hear a little bit more from the Pope before we close out. And I really appreciate your time. This was pulled together with no advanced timing.
Many families saw their homes swallowed by mud and many roads.
He's talking about Peru here. I'm going to skip forward a little bit beyond the Peru anecdote.
The image of walls does not legitimize closures or divisions, but invites each and every one to do their part. Brick by brick, a more just coexistence takes shape, capable of safeguarding the dignity of all. Nehemiah's effort speaks to our time. Artificial intelligence can be a construction site of history from within a horizon of communion in which technical progress learns to serve human life. Let each builder choose with care how to build, warned St. Paul. He does not fear the work site. Rather, he warns against building without solid foundations. Let's not fear artificial intelligence, but constantly keep the question of the human in play. We cannot be careless with our most powerful technical instruments. True development, says St. Paul VI, always concerns each man and the whole man. Each means that no person can be left at the margins of digital transformation. Whole means that no one can be reduced to productivity, to cognitive performance, or to mere data. The person bears within him or herself a freedom, an interiority, and the vocation to love and worship that no machine can replace or block. Only with such an integral vision can artificial intelligence be directed toward the common good. Only together, those who design systems and those affected by them, richer countries and poorer ones, institutions and individuals, power centers and peripheries, will we be able to build a future not for a privileged few, but for the entire human family. This is the civilization of love, which St. Paul VI spoke and which St. John Paul II so forcefully proclaimed as a horizon to seek together. It's not a naive dream, it is a direction. It is the path that Jesus Christ opens within history. For this reason, the Church wishes with humility and frankness to be part of conversations on artificial intelligence. We do not possess the technical answers, nor do we seek to displace those with expertise. But we bring a wisdom concerning the human that our present time desperately needs. Every person is unique and irreplaceable, a free and intelligent subject with a conscience, capable of seeking God, serving one another, and caring for our common home. I therefore invite all members of the Church and of the human family, let us learn to listen to one another, face the present challenges with courage, and cooperate in building a more human and fraternal society. From this launch of Magnifica Humanitas, please take with you a commitment to stay awake and as artisans of hope to keep on building the worksite of our time. May the Spirit of the risen Lord sustain our work together. I entrust each of you to our Mother Mary. Her Magnificat sings of the greatness of God who uplifts the lowly. May she teach us to recognize the true greatness of every man and every woman in loving and serving. May the Lord make fruitful the great enterprise that today we entrust to his grace, letting the civilization of love mature in history. And upon all of you, I heartily invoke God's blessing.
There we go. So, any last thoughts on how he's wrapped this up? He wants to stay in the room. I guess that's keep us in the room, all of us, including the marginal.
And maybe that's the most important thing, Andy, here. That's as the head of the Vatican Church, but also as a thought leader, a social leader, and a spiritual leader here. He is asking for conversation. There's a humility here that says we need to do this together. We need to be talking. We need to be listening. We need to be building together. And I actually think that that's a positive and an important message.
And Brad, any last reflection?
I agree with that. I do have to note the way he relies on the individual as a free and moral entity, which of course is key to Catholic and to Christian theology. And I wonder how that's going to work in the future when we develop the technologies that we have that enable us to, well, I would like to see how that develops in the future.
Yeah, you mean because we're just all struggling with that question of that the maintenance of the human part, which again is Andrew's sweet spot.
Well, and we all also know that individuals now are manipulable at scales and with precision that 5 years ago we couldn't hope for, 10 years ago we couldn't hope for.
Yeah.
The individual is an endangered species. And, if we're going to talk about protecting values, the first thing we ought to try to figure out is how we can prevent that from being an overwhelming part of the future.
You reminded me, I don't know if I wrote this at all somewhere, but I had this sense of the tension. This was many years ago, just when the positive internet and social media were emerging. I was thinking the dynamic feels like how much of you wants to be a brain and how much of you ends up being a neuron as an individual. Like I spend a lot of my time moving information from one thing to another. So that feels more neuronal. And then I write I do my songwriting, and that's me as an individual. And now, of course, songwriting is being taken over by Suno, but I won't let that happen to my own.
Well, I had Gemini. I had a long discussion with Gemini about a blues song I was writing.
Ah.
I haven't finished it, but I don't know who to give the authorship to.
But maybe this is the intriguing future, and I'm not sure how far the encyclical sort of sets the foundations for this, but sort of human intelligence versus alien intelligence. What could be multiplicative there? How could we become more than we are, or better than we are, or more vibrant than we are? And all of those examples are examples of that. Where is the AI plus humanity, or humans, or the individual equals something amazing and something we haven't even conceived of yet?
Yep.
That's that's a key. Making sure it's a mutual relationship that enriches your humanity is a key thing here. Well, this has been a really valuable conversation, even though it's just an initial take on what's unfolding here. And I just think it's the more of this, the better. Actually, you know what? Just for your own amusement. Whoops, hold on a second. It's playing twice for some reason. Why is it playing twice?
Twice as good.
No. So here's a song that I wrote, and I'm planning to do with a band eventually. And hopefully this reflects some aspect of the potential positivity. The original song, it's with me.
Somehow the world avoided nuclear war. Somehow the climate didn't go to hell. Somehow the Constitution never fell.
Don't know how I got here 2044. Somehow the world avoided nuclear war. Somehow the climate didn't go to hell. Somehow the Constitution never fell.
It'll be better with a real band. That's kind of like.
I don't think so. I think Suno's got it, baby. That is a great bass run.
Actually, I think you're right. And I was talking with someone, a Nashville songwriter, who said, we were all pissed off when drum machines started coming in and in the 1980s. And he said, now it's just another tool that a drummer uses. Drummers haven't gone away, etc. So, we all have to play with these technologies at all these scales. I do think it's great that the Pope and that Chris Olah are in the same room, in the same space, really making sure that those conversations are happening in our own lives, as Andrew Maynard in his books and his Substack have made clear. There's tons we can do to maintain our humanity while we get the most out of these tools. And Brad, thanks so much for being who you are and thinking deeply about these questions. I think it's really it's valuable as well. And I think that's a wrap for this discussion. These issues are hardly going away. They're just coming back over and over. And here again, this is a photo from the end of the event where we have Anthropic and the Vatican convening. So onward and upward.
So, Andy, do you have a complete recording that Suno did?
Yeah, sure.
Song?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Yeah, I would like to. I say I like the bass line that Suno came up with.
I agree. I'll send you both. It's on my new album, with only my guitar and vocal. But yeah, and I'll be playing it with a band up here in Maine. So anyone come to down East Maine, you can hear me play some music soon.
Oh, sweet. Thanks
to both of you. Thanks to the work you do at Arizona State, both of you. And here we are in the midst of the transhuman condition, transitioning. Take care, everyone. And anyone watching, you can share this as soon as we're done on any platform you're watching on. That's it. Oh, hold on one second. And